Hey there, Frank DiLella from New York One News here, and I'm delighted to be sitting down virtually with celebrated choreographer and director Sir Matthew Bourne. Hey there, Matthew, how are you?
Hi, Frank. Very good. Under the circumstances, I'm doing okay. Thank you.
I have to ask, how is your company New Adventures holding up during this time?
Well, it's coming up for a year in mid-March from when we performed our last performance in a theatre in front of an audience. So it's taking its toll. You know, we've been trying to keep everyone connected. We've been doing online classes, as many of the dance companies have been doing. All sorts of other initiatives that we've been doing to sort of involve people, you know, and sort of keep them feeling part of the family. But a lot of them have been out of work for getting on for a year now, and it's time we got back to work.
Your dancers are truly athletes. Your company is made up of athletes. How are they staying in shape during the global pandemic?
Well, they're all doing class, but it tends to be in back of their family homes, many of them, because many of them, let's face it, are quite young, so they've gone home to their parents, many of them, and it's in kitchens, in living rooms. You know, the feet sometimes hit the furniture. It's not ideal, but they're doing their best to create space and to try and move. But of course, dancers love space. They love eating up space, so they're really missing that space of a studio or a stage.
Obviously, we're here today in celebration of one of the great spaces in New York City, City Center. One of your artistic homes, your artistic home on the East Coast, I shall say. City Center is about to host four of your major works, three of which have never been seen on stage here in New York.
Yes, I suddenly realised that. I'm really excited about that. I mean, Swan Lake is one of the pieces that one of the films that we're showing, and that's of course has been the City Centre and on Broadway, of course, many years ago. I think it's the 20th anniversary, actually, sort of coming up quite soon, or maybe 25th. I don't know. It was a while ago, but this film that we have of the piece is a brand new production, actually, that was seen at City Centre last year, the end of last year. And so it's a brand new film of that new production. But the three pieces that have not been seen in New York are two of them quite old pieces. My Cinderella, which followed Swan Lake, actually, in my sort of history of my pieces in 1997, and has been revived many times since. And the Carman, which was the piece after that, which was made in 2000 originally, which has never played New York, sadly, but exciting because it's the chance to see it now. And the last piece that we're screening is, of course, the newest piece. So that's really exciting. But the premiere of the newest piece that we've made, which was just the year before last, which is our version of Romeo and Juliet. So I'm really excited that all my New York friends and fans are going to get the chance to see these pieces, especially the ones maybe they've been hankering after for a long time that have never come. You know, it's going to be great.
I know I'm anxious. I follow you all over the world, Matthew, and I'm excited to see, of course, the Carmen, Cinderella, Romeo and Juliet, and Swan Lake once more. You do play all over the world. What is so special about City Center? Because you always come back home to City Center.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful space for dance, you know, and I really love that connection with a venue which is dance based, I suppose. Like we have Sadler's Wells here in London. The City Centre seems to be that theatre in New York that really glorifies and specialises in dance. And you really feel appreciated when you're at City Centre for the art form that you sort of love so much. So I think that's why we've found our natural home at City Centre.
What I love about your work, Matthew, is that it is truly a real blend of theater and dance, your two loves. We've talked about this quite a lot.
Yeah.
Who inspires you? Who inspires you in terms of artists and your work?
Well, it's for many years, I would always say the two Freds. You know, I would always say Fred Astaire and Frederick Ashton, both, you know, great storytellers through dance. But of course, there's many other people outside of the dance world, you know, that I love. I've always said Hitchcock was a big influence on me, that real mixture of, you know, storytelling, but mixture of drama and suspense and glamour, all those things which I love. A lot of movie makers, you know, I'm very inspired by. I think it's important for me to look beyond the dance world for ideas and for the pieces that I do, because it's an audience that we are really trying to reach, you know, and have done for many years. So I love, for example, I love the works of Harold Pinter, Tennessee Williams, people like that. I find very inspiring and bring those artists into my work as well.
Swan Lake is obviously your masterwork. You received 2 Tony Awards for that production as choreographer and director. Let's talk about the genesis of Swan Lake. Where did this idea come from?
Well, the idea of making a piece based on the famous classical ballet, you know, seemed like a crazy idea for a very small company in 1995 when we made it. But I'd had a bit of a small success with a version of Nutcracker, which was a commission from another company, actually, Opera North, and we did it for the Edinburgh Festival, and I'd loved creating that piece. So I thought I'd love to do another one. You know, I'd love to look at another score like that, a full score. And Swan Lake was the one I'd always loved and I'd seen many times and sort of daydreamed while I was watching it, never thinking I would get the chance to do it. But I felt very strongly that I had to come up with something very different to be able to justify doing it, because there's so many versions of it around in the classical form. So I'm searching for this, what I call the big idea. I have with every piece, actually. And the big idea with this piece was, what if the swans were male? And what if the royal family were somewhat more recognizable as members of the royal family of the day? Not that they're meant to be those people, of course, but a more modern royal family. And they were the two sort of things. And it made a lot of sense just to go back and watch swans, watch real swans. And I knew the ballet very well. So there you could say there's a mixture of the ballet, the classical ballet, and real swan movement together in our version. And male swans made sense. You know, there's an aggression in them. They're quite scary creatures. So it kind of went with Tchaikovsky's music, which is overwhelmingly dramatic and emotional at times. And so it was one of those little light bulb moments that just sort of took off.
Truly spectacular, Matthew. And I have to say, the show was updated compared to what that original mid-90s production was. We saw that when it was recently at City Center on stage, and I think we'll see that on film as well, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's the brand new version. We've actually filmed it 3 times. First with Adam Cooper, who was our original Swan, back at the very beginning of our first tour. And we'd actually filmed it in 3D, believe it or not, in about 2011, I think, 10 or 11. And so this is the 3rd time, but we felt it was justified because we'd really put a lot of new things into it and had really rethought it. Les Brotherston and I, particularly the designer. We had a brand new lighting design as well by the wonderful Paulie Constable, who's now our resident artist with us. So there was a lot of reason for doing it and a lot of reason for capturing it again as well.
Let's talk about the Carman, because this is truly one of my favorite pieces of yours. I traveled outside of London a couple years ago to see it done regionally, and it's just a brilliant piece that we've never seen in New York City. Where did the Carman come from?
Well, it's interesting. The Carman, for me at the time, if I think back, was a sort of reaction, not against Swan Lake and Cinderella, which were the previous 2 pieces, but I felt I wanted to make something about young people and people in my company who had been, you know, playing princes and princesses and people from another era, the 1940s, as Cinderella is set. And I thought it would be nice to make something young and dirty and sexy for these dancers to sort of really get their teeth into and enjoy. So the music of Carmen, the opera, in a version by Shedrin, which was written as a ballet, actually, but for his wife. The name's gone out of my head for the moment, but it was a ballet. But it's only 40 minutes long, so I got my regular collaborator Terry Davis to extend that score using other music from Carmen, and we created this piece, which isn't Carmen, the opera. It's called The Carman, and it's about a mechanic who arrives in a small town in America in about 1960, and starts to have a relationship with the wife of the garage owner, in which he has got a job recently. It's sort of a little bit based on the film and the novel The Postman Always Rings Twice, but then of course it goes off on its own tangents. And the thing that's interesting about it is it's, as far as I know, the only sort of full-length dance thriller there is. Maybe someone can correct me on that and name another one, but it's a thriller. It's basically a thriller with plot twists and a lot of melodrama and a lot of sex and a lot of murder and lust and obsession and all those big emotions that dance does really well.
Matthew, the one thing that sticks out to me about the Carmen is, like you mentioned, the sex, the emotion, and that is all captured obviously in your language through dance, right? Yeah. Where do you get that language? Where does that come from for you as an artist, as a creator?
Well, I guess you're trying to speak, without words, and that's always the thing, and it not necessarily the basic dance steps that like arabesques and pirouettes and things are going to say that. So you've got to really look a bit further, and you're using a mixture of body language, gesture, acting without words, but facially, and the use of the body. And those big emotions, as I just said, really work well for dance. You can convey things extremely well, and you can be larger than life, So, but I think Carmen in particular is based on many, many films. It's very film noirish, and it's got a little bit of Brando in it and these sort of people. So James Dean, and you're obviously going to look at these people for body language and the physicality, which is not dance-like. So I'm asking people to be much more naturalistic in the way that they are as dancers. They can't come with lots of affectations. So it's about paring all that down and trying to portray real people. And that is how we connect with an audience, I think, through the kind of work that we do.
Your Romeo and Juliet, which also will be presented on the City Center virtual stage, was filmed for a theatrical release. This is a property that, if I'm not mistaken, you were scared to tackle. This was something that you were kind of pushing away for a long time, correct?
Yes, it's true, Frank. A lot of people kept saying to me after many years of doing what I do, when are you going to do Romeo and Juliet? When's that coming? And I kept thinking, there's too many of it. Versions around in every medium, actually, not just in dance, but in everything. Everyone's doing Romeo and Juliet. So I was a bit reluctant, partly because I thought, how am I going to come up with an idea, that feels different enough? And that's again me looking for what is the big idea about this piece that's going to make it different. And actually, oddly, the thing that really turned me towards getting excited about it was something very simple. Was that to really make it young. Cast it young, make it about young talent, which we did around the country. We had a talent search for some of the cast who joined us around the country when we went on our tour, but also to bring in young associates to work with all of us old hands like Les Brotherston and Paulie, the lighting designer, and we had a young associate working alongside us to learn but also to help create. And I worked with an amazing young woman called Ariel Smith was my associate choreographer. She's about 20 at the time. And it was great. We ended up being real, I know it's like real mates, actually. We worked together very well. We worked together very happily and talked about the piece in great detail. It wasn't a sort of tag along and watch what I do kind of situation. She very much got involved, and I loved hearing what she had to say, as I did the whole cast, because I wanted to hear what the young people had to say. Me being a bit older now, you want to try and stay in touch, especially if you're doing a piece about young people. I felt that was so important with this piece, and I loved it in the end. I loved making it in the end with that great Prokofiev score, and with a whole bunch of really exciting talent to work with. And I like what we ended up doing in the end. It wasn't something I was sort of slightly forced into at the beginning because of the whole aspect of working with lots of young people, which was nice. But I actually loved the piece we made in the end. And one thing I will say, though, for people who love their Romeo and Juliet, it's really quite different Yeah, I wouldn't look for the story, It's a Romeo and Juliet type piece. Some of the characters are there in a different way,
I,
but it.
I, I
Have you
was going
seen?
to say,
Have you
I
seen
mean,
it?
I've only seen clips of it, Matthew, but looking at the photos and the clips online, this does not look like Romeo and Juliet. I mean, specifically, talk about the setting, talk about where it takes place.
Yeah, well, I won't give too much away because it's one of the mysteries of the piece in a way. It's set in an institute of some kind where young people are incarcerated, and the boys and the girls, the men and the women, are kept separate from each other, and they're allowed to meet like once a week or once a month in a sort of social situation. You don't really know why they're there. It could be a borsal, it could be a hospital, it could be a prison, it could be a detention center, it could be any number of things. But the sense is that these are a little bit troubled young people, I guess, who maybe have sort of dumped there for some reason. And it's slightly set in the future, just a little. That's the setting in which our story takes place. So we're already done away a little bit with lots of aspects of the families and what you normally get, the gangs and everything. It's quite a different story, but I mean, it is also extremely charming and amazingly performed by the young Romeo and Juliet, who in this film who are really express that feeling of young love. And a lusty young love, that when you first fall in love with someone.
And just talk about capturing it, Matthew. How many days did you guys film this production? Can you just talk about those elements?
Well, all the films that you'll see in this season actually were filmed for release in cinemas. They're all filmed in the same way. Actually, it's a full live performance. It's not broken down and done in sections. It's done in front of an audience, and the cameramen have like 2 goes at it before the main capture that you'll see. And so they know what they're doing. They know the shots they're going for, but you get a sense of, and I've discovered this through doing things different ways in the past. If it's going to be a live performance, you want to feel it's a live performance with an audience there. You want to hear reaction. And it can feel rather odd if you don't have that. So at this time when we're not experiencing live performances, this is the nearest we can get to having that real feel of a performance that begins and ends in the time it takes to do it. So you see literally the blood, sweat and tears of Romeo and Juliet, for example. By the end of the piece, you feel you've gone through it with them. And I'm very proud of them, actually. I work with a director called Ross McGibbon, who's probably the only person in the world who can capture these shows in the brief amount of time he has to do it. He heavily scripts and works with great cameramen and women. I don't think there's anyone else. It would freak anyone else out. It's just because he's so experienced at doing it, and it captures something which is very close to the live experience.
I want to mention your Cinderella for a moment because I caught that at Sadler's Wells a couple years ago when you brought that back. And for that setting, you set it against the backdrop of World War II.
Yeah.
Where did that idea come from?
Well, that was the big idea, of course, that we were talking about. And with that piece, I love the score. I knew the ballet by Frederick Ashton very well when I was thinking of making it, but I thought I've got to find something. I did my research. I read about Prokofiev writing this score. And of course, I read that he wrote it during the Second World War. And it was premiered at the Bolshoi just after the war had finished. So I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder if it's in the music. Can you hear that in this music, which is essentially written as a fairy tale ballet in the manner of Sleeping Beauty or Swan Lake? And I really felt it was. When I listened to it with those ears, it sounded like a great film score. I could almost hear the bombs dropping, which happened nightly during the Blitz. And it was also a time that was very important for my family. Both my sets of grandparents and my parents lived in London during the Blitz. They were not evacuated. They lived within streets of each other. And so it was something that they would tell me about as I was growing up, that period in their history when they were young, and how oddly exciting it was, because they didn't really know they were at war necessarily. They just it was a terrible time for the adults, but for the kids, it felt sort of something thrilling about it. Oddly, and maybe because they had great parents who sort of shielded them from it and made it that way, for them. But it was such a rich time also to use filmic influences. There's an enormous list of movies that we watch for this piece, and a lot of the characters are based on all sorts of people from movies. It's mostly based on a film called A Matter of Life and Death, which I think was called something else in the States, Stairway to Heaven, I think. David Niven film, where he's sort of caught between life and death, and he's not allowed. The question is he allowed to live because he's fallen in love with someone just before he died? Supposedly was supposed to die. So an angel comes down from heaven to sort of come and get him because they've made a mistake and he should have died. And we use elements of that story, not in that way, but we have a guardian angel as the fairy godmother figure. And it's all about love and the power of love in difficult times. And that's something that's very resonant at the moment as well, actually. This piece does resonate, I think, at the moment. We're going through another difficult time in our history, not maybe quite so dramatic as having bombs dropped on us every night, but even so, we are experiencing something extraordinary. So I think it does resonate at the moment, that piece, very much.
Matthew, I have to talk about your look, the feel of your company, the look of your art on stage. The first word that comes to mind is cool. You mentioned kind of, the nod to film. We get that in it. It's hip. It's classic. You've collaborated a great deal over the years with Les Brotherston. We see his designs in various pieces that you created for the stage. Can you talk about that relationship and creating those worlds with him?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Les is probably my most important collaborator in that sense, but about creating the worlds that we create. Actually, there's a couple of designs. I'm going to point that way. His designs here on my wall here in my office in London. I guess we click together. We think about things in a similar way. We like a lot of the same things. If you looked at our video DVD collections over the years, they would have a lot of the same films in them. And I suppose we have a shorthand now, and we understand what it is that we do together, which is not to be giving all the answers all the time, but to work together on a collaboration which can change throughout the process. So he doesn't just deliver me a design. The other thing is, I guess what Les's contribution to dance has been, it's really revolutionary, apart from sort of iconic things like the Swan Lake swan costumes, which is in a sense a sort of feat of imagination in a way. What Les is very famous for is creating dance costumes that look like it was a film or a play, and they don't look like adapted dance costumes, which you often get in a ballet with a tutu or the point shoes or whatever it may be. They generally feel like, for many audiences, it's a way in because it doesn't look odd. It looks like a story that how you would normally have it told in a film or a play. And I think that's something. And their dance, they do move really well. He's very good at that. Obviously, they can't be too restricting. But I think the look of our shows is quite unique for dance.
Matthew, is there a dance piece other than your own that has had a major impact or influence on your work? If you had to pick one, what would that be?
So many, really. I mean, I guess if I can pick something from a film, I would talk about the Fred and Ginger number, Never Gonna Dance, which is at the end of the film Swing Time, which encapsulates something in the early stages, I suppose, of what dance can do story-wise. Because Fred and Ginger didn't really have love scenes; they danced the love scenes, and there's such feeling and depth to what they managed to get across in this number, and it tells a whole little story of their relationship, and still delivers on a level of dance which is spectacular and beautiful, but also tells you something about their relationship. And I think for me that probably when I first saw it, I thought I'm watching a sort of mini masterpiece here. I maybe didn't know all the things I'm saying about it now, but I felt there was something there that connects with audiences in a way that's much deeper than just here come the dancers and it's a big song and dance, showstopper or something. It showed that there could be a lot more depth and storytelling within dance, and I think that's the piece that's really influenced me always. Whenever I see it, I still love it.
You've tackled film, you've tackled classic ballets, you've really done it all. Is there one, what's the next property you're dying to tackle?
I get asked this a fair bit, and I usually say, people suggest something to me, throw something out there. I had the great good fortune to do the Red Shoes fairly recently, and that was something that would have been the thing I would have said a while ago. That's still something I was waiting to do. I don't have many more on my list. I did have a list a few years back, and I've ticked them all off, I think. It's a little harder to find the pieces now, and a story that really lends itself to the kind of storytelling that we do. Sometimes I'd almost wish someone would set me the task, going like, well, do something with that, take that, see what you could do with it, and then you'd have to solve a lot of problems to make it work. But I can't name you one thing, although I'm reading at the moment, I'm working on a new piece at the moment, a smaller scale piece that will tour the UK, hopefully later this year. I can give away one thing. Nobody knows this, but it's an exclusive for you, Frank. Is that I'm reading the novels of a guy called Patrick Hamilton. Now, people may not know him very well. They will know him when I mention that he wrote the play Rope, which Hitchcock turned into a movie, and also he wrote the play Gaslight, which was another famous movie filmed twice. But his books are really interesting me at the moment, and they're about a sort of, they're almost set in the late 20s, early 30s in London, but they're sort of the flip side of Noel Coward, who was around at the same time. They're much more about ordinary people. They're very sort of passionate little love stories, and stories that sort of that ring true about people who are unglamorous and ordinary. It sounds a bit boring, I know. Not what I normally do, but I think it'd be fun. It'd be fun to capture something. It'd be really with some of my really good dancer actors that I work with now, in a smaller, more intimate setting, and really work on something which is very heartfelt.
Well, sign me up, Matthew. I'll follow you wherever you go. I do want to end our conversation with a question in regards to just the theater, the performing arts. When we get out of this crisis, when the pandemic is finally over, what's the one small thing you were looking forward to the most when it comes to being back in the theater?
It's funny, a lot of things that I've been watching, a lot of people are getting very emotional when they see theater people come out and sing and do these online things and stuff. And I enjoy it, but I'm not getting emotional in that way. And I've realized the thing that I miss is being within an audience, being part of that audience and experiencing something in front of me live. And there's no other way of doing it, and that's the thing that I crave and I miss so much. And I do it a lot with my own shows, as you know. I'm always within the audience. I don't hang around at the sides or in the wings. I'm always in the middle of the audience, and I love that feeling of an audience gradually getting something or experiencing something or feeling something. And I think that's the thing I miss the most, and that may be the furthest away from us at the moment, is that kind of experience. But it will come back, and we'll be ready, raring to go when it does, and so will audiences, and so will performers. It's something we're all missing so much at the moment.
Absolutely. But until then, we get your glorious productions on the virtual stage at City Center. Sir Matthew Bourne, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Frank.